Hello and welcome back to American Cinema. We are at Lecture 7, the late 70s. Now, it's this time that really gives the 70s its reputation for hedonism. This is the time of disco, and this is the time when President Carter was elected, who was much more liberal, and really the country kind of relaxes from the earlier tensions. Vietnam's over now, and a sort of era of hedonism, great music, and flamboyant fashion sets in. Marijuana and cocaine are more commonly available and used. We see a disco explode after Saturday Night Fever, one of the films we're addressing this week. The craze sort of spreads out from New York and it becomes a major fad. And really, this is the emergence of urban gay culture. That was a foundation of disco culture. And so we see a transformation in clothing and in sensuality and men learning to dance. We also see the emergence of feminism, which is a counter to some of the macho sexism of the 70s. All these forces are going on. Also, we have tech emerging at this time. We have the Steadicam, which we'll learn about in the video lecture. Also, motion capture cameras. Lots of developments in terms of practical effects and special effects, particularly Star Wars and Jaws introduce and improve upon those techniques. And lastly, home video. Most importantly, home video. Towards the end of the decade, home video comes in and begins to transform Hollywood and transform the relationship that audiences have to movies. Because now you could own a film, which meant you could watch it at any time with your friends. You could stop, you could rewind. More about that next week. So we are in the Blockbuster era. So what does that mean? It's a continuation of the new Hollywood. We have these new directors in Hollywood that have come up. They've gotten the security and the trust of the studios, and they're making films. But then all of a sudden, we see a shift away in tone from the darker, cynical, political films that had unhappy endings and anti-heroes in the early 70s into fantasy escapism films that have more traditional heroes that have a happy ending. So the two films that really do this, there's a number. Jaws, then Star Wars, and then Rocky were released one summer after each other. And all of them really got audiences to the theater. People went to see them multiple times. This is where the term blockbuster came from, because there was lines around the theater that were breaking up traffic, busting up the block. So these films changed Hollywood. They were higher budget. They had higher returns, making millions and millions more than previous films had. People would see them multiple times. They could be merchandised. They had special effects. The appeal was much broader than the political and sort of angst-ridden films of the earlier 70s. More people were coming back to the theater. And also at this time, America was coming out of an extended long period from the mid-60s to the 70s of political strife. So there was a sense that people just wanted to chill. They wanted to relax. They wanted to enjoy some music, maybe go dancing, and forget about the worries of the day. And that's the character of the late 70s. But in Hollywood, it was transforming and exploding, and all of a sudden, studios start putting more money into these new Hollywood films. Thus, we have the blockbuster era. And the other element that's really important to this is all the directors. It's all the young directors, many of them from the new Hollywood era, who are now making these larger budget and more fantasy films, more escapist films. They are the film school generation. These are individuals that went to film school. So I'm talking about George Lucas, Spielberg, Coppola, De Palma, Milius, others that went to film school in the 60s and early 70s, as they had begun in the 60s, and they learned the craft of filmmaking that exposed to European filmmakers. So they bring that influence into American film, and we begin to see that. Now, the blockbuster era is a return to more traditional American styles with a happy ending, but they still have a little bit of that flavor they picked up from film school. So let's get to the films. First off, wow, a masterpiece, The Godfather. One of the most important films, considered by some the second or best film, American film ever made. Of course, three other films were made after it, so it did create its own little small franchise. Huge success for New Hollywood. This is the first one that goes off. This actually happens in 1972. So the dates you'll notice for some of the films vary a little bit. I'm not just strictly within the 75 to 80 parameter. And this film is so important. Brando gives an Oscar award winning performance. The lighting in the film transformed Hollywood because the cinematographer chose to make all of the mafia scenes very dark, which was sort of a no no back in the day because those films couldn't play in drive-ins, which were very popular. That's where a lot of teenagers saw these films. If the film was too dark, the ambient light would spill the screen. So the film was huge. It had a national release strategy. It was one of the first films to do that, and it really affected American filmmaking. It was very European, and suddenly it was a serious film about a formerly tawdry topic. Up next, we have Jaws, another monumental film, top five most influential films in film history. Period. Full stop. So it's a traditional narrative with a good guy hero. There's an adventure. They're trying to defeat a monster, the shark. It's got likable heroes. It's got a happy ending. Spoiler alert. Um, but it's the special effects and it's the way that it captivated audience, the way that people went back. It became an international sensation. That was another aspect of blockbuster films is they played well overseas, and so the money that Hollywood could make really expanded. They could play in, in different languages because the plots weren't complex and political and native to America. Okay, up next we have a very great cultural film, Saturday Night Fever, which really captures the era, the disco era. It's sort of self-explanatory. It really set off the craze, made John Travolta a star. Then we finished with two films which stylistically would more accurately fit maybe in New Hollywood, or they sort of ride the bridge between. They have a New Hollywood aesthetic. Rocky is set in the city, a dirty city, Philadelphia. He has a rough life. He's a working class hero. Apocalypse Now, of course, is a war film, but they both have a more New Hollywood political slant. But in the case of Rocky, it has a happy ending, and it turned into a huge blockbuster. Audiences loved it. Of course, it turned into a giant franchise. There's 8, 9, 10 films. Apocalypse Now was very politically controversial. It emerges in '79 and becomes one of the definitive statements about Vietnam. And we will see in the '80s a series of films that all come out making statements about Vietnam. But Apocalypse Now was so much more. A complete tragedy for the director. Many, many things went wrong. Great story there, which we will cover in the featured film section. But also, it's an incredible masterpiece of filmmaking. It is a blockbuster in terms of its scale, the extras, the budget, and so forth. Okay, well, that wraps up a very dense week of films. I hope you enjoyed the lecture. Please make sure you watch the video compilation, watch the featured films. Some of these films, we're starting to come into a time that some of you may have some recollection of. You maybe have seen Star Wars. And the reason I didn't feature Star Wars in this particular unit is because I assume most of you had some knowledge of it, but you may have missed Jaws or Saturday Night Fever or so forth. Anyway, have a great week, and we'll see you next time.